Hello, my name is John, and today we're in the cockpit of the AJS-37 Viggen again. In this video, we're going to take a look on how to manually create a flight plan using the F10 map and the CK-37 computer. This is especially useful if you're intending to fly on multiplayer servers such as Open Conflict or Blue Flag, where you usually don't have a pre-planned route or pre-planned target waypoints and you want to set them up manually, and ideally before flight. However, you can also use this stuff I'm going to show you today during your flight for setting up waypoints or target locations or BX waypoints. So yeah, let's get right into it and let's get the aircraft prepared first. Now, after starting the aircraft up or after doing the hot start sequence, the first thing you want to do is to insert the data cartridge down to the left. And as usual, we want to load the data from the cartridge, even if there's no flight plan pre-stored, by using the code 90 and 99. And we're going to load that. And it takes a second. And even if there is no route pre-planned, this will set the starting airfield to the correct position. And we can check that by going to the output mode while being in the master mode ref Lola. And we're going to see the code 9012 up here. And 9012 is the code for Senaki Kolki, which is our starting airfield for this flight. You always want to check and make sure that the code up here is the same code as the one for your starting airfield. And the codes you can find either in the manual or on the kneeboard page. And yeah, you could even print them out if you want, so because that would make it probably quite easy to reference them during the flight if you ever need to do so. Okay, if we go to the F10 map now, we're going to take a look on where we're going to start. And as said, we're here at Senaki Kolki. And for this flight, I'm just planned a small ferry flight up to Beslan. And for this flight, we already have prepared ourselves an alternate airport as well, which will be Mostok. And that one is a nice distance away from Beslan. And if, for example, especially on a multiplayer server, there's something happening to Beslan, either be it an attack or, for example, an aircraft that has crashed on a runway and the runway is blocked, we already have ourselves an alternate prepared and accounted for. So if we ever happen to have to fly to that alternate, we are all prepared. And for this flight, we're going to use 3 waypoints. The first one I want to set somewhere around here, directly after taking off. We want to head to that one, and we want to make sure that that one is visible on radar to make sure our navigation system is correct for the longer duration of the flight. And the next waypoint will be somewhere up here. The position of that one is not so important because we don't have any remarkable terrain features that we can make out on the radar. So we're going to set it somewhere up here. And the last waypoint will be somewhere around here, and the extension of the runway center line of Beslan. And we're going to use a lake or something we can identify by radar. So for example, if there would be bad weather or an overcast at Beslan, we would make sure that our navigation system is correct and we have the most accurate navigation data possible to us. So after setting up Senaki, the first thing I usually like to do is to set the landing airfields. So if you go back into the cockpit, I already looked up the codes in the reference list for both Beslan and Mostok. And the code for Beslan is 9021. So we're going to enter that up here by entering 90 and 21. And we're going to set it to the landing airfield down here. And you could see the dashed fuel indicator moving to 40%. And that indicator uses the computer to calculate the fuel consumption and show us the minimum fuel we need. So from going from here to Beslan, we need at least 40% fuel. And this is obviously just a standard value. If you're going to use afterburner or something like that, the value will be a bit too low. Or if you use maximum afterburner, it will be quite a lot too low. Anyway, the next airfield or the next thing we want to set is our alternate destination. And our alternate destination for this flight is Mostok. And the code for that is 9017. However, for setting it as an alternate destination, we have to change the second digit to a 99. So instead of entering 90, we're going to enter 99, then 17. And we are also going to click the landing airfield button down here. Now the first thing we want to do is make sure after setting those two airfields, we want to make a small sanity check if everything is correct. So by going to the output mode and the active position mode and hitting the airfield button, we can see that our first airfield, L1, is at about 235 kilometers and our alternate airfield is about at 270 kilometers. And these values seem kind of correct. They're in the right mark and they should be quite accurate, I think. So that is good. Now the next thing we want to do, going back to our starting airfield here, the next thing we want to do is going ahead and looking at the map again and finding our first waypoint. And as said before, we want to use something that is visible on radar so we can make sure that after takeoff our navigation system is correct and set up properly. And I already looked at the map a bit before and I think this island here in the river is suitable for that. And we're going to look at the position of it by putting the mouse on it. In the top left of the screen you can see the coordinates, and we're going to write those down so we can remember those. If you're good with numbers, you can also remember them by heart. I'm not that good by numbers or with numbers, so I'm not going to do that. And I will enter it longitude first because that's the way the computer takes it, and it makes confusion or reduces confusion later on. So I'm writing down 42 degrees, 42 minutes and 36 seconds east, as well as 42 degrees, 9 minutes and 10 seconds north. So that's our first waypoint. Let's go ahead and enter that in the computer real quick. Now entering data like that in the computer is again done in ref Lola and in the input mode. And Lola is longitude, latitude. Just remember that you want to enter longitude first for coordinates. So we're going to enter 42 degrees, 42 degrees, 42 minutes and 30 seconds east. And now after we have entered 6 digits, the display will blank out again and we can enter the second set of coordinates, which is 42 degrees, 9 minutes and 10 seconds north. Now after entering both 6-digit codes, we have them cycling between the first and the second, or the longitude and the latitude. And while it's cycling, we can select a waypoint down here. We can select any waypoint as well as BX waypoints by clicking the BX button and then the numpad button for the corresponding BX button. But for this one, we will use B1. And after clicking B1, the display blanked again, showing 6 zeros, ready for the next input. Now if you go to the F10 map again, the next waypoint, as we have said before, will be somewhere around here in the mountains. And for this one, I'm not making it too accurate. This time, I'm just picking a rough position. And I'm thinking this one here is quite good actually. And if you overfly it and then head off to the north here, we should be quite fine. We will be high enough anyway because we want to make sure that we're at the proper altitude for fuel consumption for this ferry flight. If you're going to do a tech mission or something like that, you want to make sure that, and you want to be in a valley, for example, to keep behind radar cover, you want to make sure that you find yourself a position suitable for that on the map. For this ferry flight and for this tutorial, this one is fine. So going to write down the coordinates, which is 43 degrees and 54 minutes. I'm not going to write down the fully accurate coordinates because it doesn't really matter. I'm just using 4 digits for both longitude and latitude, and 42 degrees and 35 minutes north for the latitude. So I'm just using 4 digits for both, so 8 digits in total. And if the waypoint is not that accurate, and if you cannot use it for a radar fix or a navigation fix, I'm not bothering with inputting too accurate data. And because the more accurate data will not provide anything particularly well, the radar will, or the system will have some drift anyway. We're not going to use this waypoint for aligning our navigation system to the correct position again. So if the data or if the waypoint is just a rough position, this is totally sufficient. Now entering that waypoint again, we're going to enter 43 degrees, 54 minutes and 2 zeros. And for the latitude, we're going to enter 42 42 degrees and 35 minutes and 2 zeros again. And once you have entered all digits, 12 digits in total, we see the both longitude and latitude cycling again. We assign that to the B2 waypoint. And as you could see, the display went 6 zeros again, which means that the input has been taken and considered correct. If you make a rounding error, or if, for example, you have 63 seconds, which obviously can't happen, the computer will show 6 sevens here. So if there's a lot of sevens, the last input has not been validated and is not used for the computer. Could either be a rounding issue or something like that related to the coordinates. Because remember, 42 degrees and then 60 minutes, there cannot be 62 minutes. Because then there would be another degree already. Anyway, the last waypoint, as we said before, we want to set it into the center line for Beslan to make the approach a bit easier. And we're going to use the map ruler here to figure out a point here. And I think this lake should be quite sufficient. It's about 32 kilometers away. And we're going to write the coordinates down for that one as well, which is 44 degrees, 15 minutes and 57 seconds east, as well as 43 degrees, 15 minutes and 35 seconds north. And again, here I'm using the full 12 digits for the coordinates because I'm going to make a radar update on that waypoint and I want it to be as accurate as possible. Especially once I do the radar upgrade, the navigation system will hinge on that waypoint, and if I'm just using 4 digits for both longitude and latitude, I'm losing accuracy. And I don't want that, because for example, if Beslan would have an overcast and we cannot see the airfield, I want to have as accurate navigation data as possible. Preferably even using the TerNav system, because that's even more accurate than doing radar fixes, but if that's not available, we're going to use the radar on an accurate waypoint. So let's enter that as well, which is 44 degrees, 15 minutes and 57 seconds. Okay, that data has been entered. Now enter the latitude, which is 43 degrees, 15 minutes and 35 seconds. And we got them cycling again, and that one will be our B3 waypoint. And yeah, this concludes entering the waypoints. So the next thing we want to do is go to the output mode and go to the active position. And now we can select the first B1 waypoint, and we could go ahead and go to the ref Lola position here again and check the coordinates we have written down against what's displayed here and make sure that we don't have any errors in the numbers here. And this is a fine method of doing that. You can do that, enter and check all the numbers. However, that one is a bit tedious, especially if you have 10 waypoints. I mean, in the real world, you definitely want to do that, or if you want to fly in the night, or if it has to be totally accurate, I would definitely recommend doing that, or for target waypoints, because you don't want to have a wrong target waypoint. However, the faster way, and often the easier way, especially in the simulator, is just making a small sanity check. And the first thing you want to go, if you go back to the airfield, we are at 0 kilometers distance, which is to be expected because we are here at the airfield. And if you go to the B1 waypoint, it is about 50 kilometers away towards east, which is displayed down here. And that's the runway heading is towards the east. The first waypoint is towards the east of us. That sounds good. If you go to the B2 waypoint, that one is a bit more to the north, which is to be expected because we're making a left-hand turn, and it's about 160 kilometers away, which is also about halfway through the flight. And the B3 waypoint is now directly to the left of us right now, but will be to the northeast later on during the flight. And that one is about 215 kilometers away, which is also quite within our scenario here, because the destination airfield is about 235 kilometers away. So just by checking that, we can make sure, well, the direction is correct and the distances are not totally off. If we had a waypoint, for example, if the B3 waypoint would only show up at 75 kilometers, or if the heading would be totally wrong, we know, well, we might have entered a wrong number or something is amiss in the system. And that's just a quick check I like to do before takeoff. If you do it a lot and if you don't talk over it and explain it, it's done within 20 seconds. And yeah, that one makes just sure you're not flying to the wrong destination, because that would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? Anyway, we have set all the waypoints like we wanted for this flight. I'm going back to the starting airfield waypoint right now because it will cycle automatically once we have taken off. The B waypoint, okay, that's one is there, perfect. And now I will taxi to the runway. And once we have taken off, I will time accelerate to our first waypoint, where we will perform a radar fix. And once we are there, we will continue onwards. And I will time accelerate this flight so you guys can actually don't have to sit through the full 220 kilometers of flight. And once we arrive at the destination, I will, or any interesting waypoint, I will meet you again. Okay, once ATC stops talking, we're going to take off here. Okay, all is set. We're going to use a full afterburner takeoff. Now the automatic heading reference also works during takeoff run, so we don't have to do that manually. And heading looks good. Runway heading is about that what we have right now. Speed is alive. At about 270 kilometers, we're going to rotate a little and wait for the aircraft to lift up here. We don't want to over-rotate. Bit of a bounce due to the wind, but that's good. Or not that bad, I guess. Once we have cleared the trees, I will bring the gear up. And you can see we reach the minimum altitude for the system to cycle towards the first waypoint. B1 waypoint is selected now, and once we have gained a safe altitude, I will perform a left-hand turn towards B1. And we just use the afterburner a couple more seconds. We have plenty of fuel for this ferry flight with the external tank attached. And once we have some good speed and some altitude, we're going to bring it out of the sort of afterburner stage. And we're going to continue in a climb here because we want to gain some altitude. We can already turn on the radar as well for our first NF fix, because that waypoint is actually not too far out. And yeah, let's see how long it takes until you can see something on there, and we can make sure our navigation system is correct. Because currently, as you can see down there, the last ditch on the CK-37 shows 3 kilometers, and that's because the computer thinks it has a 3 kilometer drift going on. And especially when flying a longer mission, we don't want that much drift, so we're going to take care of it. Now let me move a bit to the right, and then once we have somewhat level and somewhat the direction established, we're going to use the autopilot with the pitch hold and continue the climb here. Make sure our airspeed is good. Sorry, bring it out of afterburner, and then let's perform our radar fix. Should get into range for that any second now, once we have the waypoint visible. Yeah, and as you can see, once again, the fuel indicator down here shows our current fuel consumption, or not our current fuel consumption, but what's currently necessary to reach the first needle. They are close together, so it's hard to see. The first needle shows our alternate, and the lower needle shows our destination airport, because obviously flying from the destination airport to the alternate would take a bit more fuel, so we need a bit more fuel reserve for reaching our alternate. Okay, we can use the autopilot's turn function by tapping trim to align ourselves with the heading for the waypoint again. The drift currently is still 3 kilometers because we are currently too high for the Terra nav. And for this flight, I intended to climb to about 6,000 meters, which should be a good altitude for this relatively short ferry flight. Now hopefully we'll get a somewhat accurate radar image of the ground down there. It's from this altitude it's quite hard, but I will use the radar trigger to move the waypoint at least closer to the river, because that's what we can see already, and once we get a bit closer we can try to make our position even more accurate. Currently we already eliminated a bit of drift, and if it's possible we will fix or make the fix more accurate. We're also going to use the altimeter as a altitude source for this flight, just to make sure that is selected. And obviously during navigation and stuff like that, always keep the basic flight parameters in check. Keep the speed in check, which is most important. Keep the climb rate in spec, and also look at the altitude so you don't drift too much. Okay, looking down once more. From this altitude, sorry, a bit too close. From this altitude, I think our island is quite hard to establish, but I think we must be quite close. And if we have a couple of 100 meters drift up here from this altitude, or in this altitude, it shouldn't be too difficult. I mean, if we stayed lower and if we weren't on a fair flight, we could have made a more accurate radar fix or anything like that, or an overfly fix, but for this one it's fine, I think. Actually, we have quite a lot of drift. I'm very sorry. I actually realized I'm looking at the completely wrong signal radar, because our island we selected is over there. Oh, that's somewhat embarrassing, but yeah, that one is even more than 3 kilometers drift. So computer lied to me, and we're going to correct that if we actually see that. I'm very sorry, I actually flew towards the wrong part of the river. Okay, yeah, and this time the island is visible. We can still fix this by slowing the radar fix over the island here. There we go. Now we have a very accurate navigation fix. And yeah, that happens once you take off and you don't use TerraNav, and the aircraft can lose the position quite a bit, because obviously it has no exact way of knowing where it is once you're at altitude. So we're not going to fly towards that waypoint because it's not on our route anymore, and we're going to select B2 waypoint and fly to the left here. And yeah, once we're getting closer to the B2 waypoint, which is still about 100 kilometers away, I'm going to get back in touch with you, and until then I will use a bit of afterburner to accelerate the climb here, and I will time warp or fast forward in post-processing, so you can actually not have to sit through the whole thing here. So here we are coming up to our B2 waypoint, and as you can see we're at about 6,000 meters above sea level, and over the mountains there's nothing for our radar to use as a solid reference point, or at least nothing worth doing here. And we're currently experiencing about 1 kilometer of radar drift, or navigation system drift, which we have to account for after or during our descent, so that the same thing doesn't happen to us during our climb. And yeah, once we're passing the B2 waypoint, which is about happening in about 20 seconds or something like that, we're going to head towards B3, and I will initiate the descent. And once we get closer to B3 and once we get ready to perform our radar fix, I'm going to catch back with you. In between I'm just descending, so we are at the proper altitude once we get close enough to the airfield. So here we are, we have leveled out about 1,500 meters above ground level. And the second waypoint we have set earlier is now currently visible from the cockpit here, and it's directly ahead of us, this lake there. The navigation system has accumulated some drift, and the radar picture in this terrain is not quite useful at this distance to set it, but I think we're getting there. If we look very closely we can see the lake there, and we can use the radar cursor to correct for the drift, which is only very small right now. And there we go. Drift has been accounted for. Navigation system is up to date if we need it for landing, which in this case, at this in this nice weather condition, is not too difficult to do actually. So we don't really need it, but we will better have it and not need it as the other way around. So now I have set the aircraft into manual landing mode. I will disengage the autopilot. I will descend a bit further. The HUD is set back to radar altimeter as altitude reference, so just to make sure. And once we have cleared this waypoint here, I will perform a right hand turn, or maybe just briefly before clearing the waypoint, and head towards the landing wayfield or airfield. And by doing so, I'll just use the L1 button here, so that we don't have too sharp of a turn to do. And we keep the speed in check. Currently the reference speed is a bit slow. 550 would be good, but 500 is fine as well, I think. And we're going to align ourselves with the runway. Once we see it, should be out there somewhere. With the nice textures, it's quite actually hard to see, but I think the airfield is somewhere back there. So yeah. And once I get closer to the airfield, I will get back to you so we can actually conclude this tutorial flight and actually finish it on the ground. And I will just, I don't think I will skip this part of the flight, then I will just go through and fast forward it and talk to you briefly before the landing, because it will take another minute or two to land there. Okay, now here on final approach, we're going to start our descent towards the runway just about now. We're going to bring the gear down for a bit more drag, which also will add some lift due to the flaps extending on the Viggen. And once the glide slope marker is on the runway, we're going to bring the flight path marker there as well. And we're going to keep the speed of about 330 kilometers for final approach here, which is a good speed, I guess, for our current weight. Oh, sorry, not bring it in burner. And we want to try to touch down on the end of the runway as gently as possible, but the Viggen can stand some beating, I guess, so it's not too dangerous here. We're quite heavy actually. She's struggling to keep up. I have some missiles loaded as well, some air-to-air missiles, which I brought along for this flight for some reason. We noticed that here on the final approach, but I'm not sure if burner would be required, but I guess okay. If it wants to do so, add a bit of burner. Probably not too realistic on final approach, but okay. My flying skills are not that perfect, and planning skills are not that good either, but we're going to manage it here, I think. There we go. A bit hard. Let's start with the braking and reverse thrust. No, reverse thrust? Why is it not adding? Okay, there we go. Now it's in reverse. Took a second. And yeah, slowing down here on the runway. And this pretty much concludes our flight, I would say. And I hope you could learn something on how to use the navigation system and how to input waypoints manually on a multiplayer server or in single player. And you can use this method for any waypoint as said before, and you can also use it to set up targets, and you could even use a JTAG or something like that for setting up waypoints. Always make sure that you have the accuracy required, or if you don't need that high accuracy, you don't have that. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked this tutorial, and fly safe.